What would you do if your fiancé found out about the harmless fling you swore he'd never discover on the morning of your wedding? I thought I was too smart, too careful. But when I saw him standing at the altar with a folder in his hand instead of a ring, I realized this wasn't heartbreak, it was justice. I know how it sounds. One last fling before the wedding. Cheap, stupid, heartless. But in my head, it wasn't cheating. It was closure. A final taste of freedom before stepping into forever. My name is Liora Dane, and I spent most of my life planning other people's perfect weddings. I thought that made me immune to mistakes. I knew every warning sign, every red flag, every little thing that could ruin a marriage. And still, I managed to ruin my own before it even started. Nathan Corbin was the kind of man people say you'd be lucky to find. Steady, kind, predictable in all the right ways. He'd propose with trembling hands, kiss my forehead every morning, and never forgot an anniversary. The kind of man who doesn't just love you, he protects you from your own chaos. I used to think that made me safe. Later, it made me restless. Because when you build your whole life around a man who never fights back, you start wondering if he even feels anything at all. I told myself it wasn't about Owen. It was about me. About saying goodbye to the reckless girl I used to be. Owen was an ex from college, the wild, impulsive type who made even normal things feel dangerous. When he messaged me out of nowhere, saying he'd be in the city for a few days, I didn't hesitate. I told Nathan I was meeting a client about a last-minute wedding booking. He believed me, of course. He always did. That night, I laughed too loud, drank too much, and told myself it was harmless. Just nostalgia, a story I'd never tell anyone. When I got home, Nathan was waiting up for me, laptop open, still working. He looked up, smiled, and asked if everything went well. I said yes, and kissed his cheek. He said he was proud of me. I told myself I'd stop after that, but we both know how promises sound when you whisper them to yourself. The next week, Owen kept texting. Nothing deep, just jokes, little memories. I replied more than I should have. It made me feel seen again, like I wasn't just someone's fiancé with a to-do list. I even started comparing them without meaning to. Owen was exciting. Nathan was safe. Owen made me feel like a woman. Nathan made me feel like a wife. I told myself there was a difference. By the time I realized how far it had gone, it was too late to undo it. The messages, the hotel booking, the photos, small things that felt private, meaningless. I deleted them all, or thought I did. I convinced myself Nathan would never know, that no one would. After all, I'd spent years cleaning up other people's messes for a living. I knew how to hide the cracks. But Nathan was paying attention in ways I never expected. He noticed the little lies, the missing receipts, the way I'd flinch when my phone buzzed, the way my laughter sounded rehearsed. He never confronted me, not once. Instead, he grew quieter, calmer, like someone waiting for something. The night before the wedding, I was in our apartment folding vows into my purse when I caught him staring at me. I asked what was wrong. He said nothing, just smiled and said, I looked beautiful. Then he went back to his study, closed the door, and I heard the faint click of a printer. If I'd asked what he was printing, maybe I'd have known. If I'd looked closer, maybe I would have seen the folder on his desk, the neat stack of papers with my name on every page. But I didn't. I just kissed him goodnight and fell asleep, believing the worst was behind me. The next morning, I woke up thinking about flowers, music, and the perfect dress. I didn't know that by the time I walked down that aisle, Nathan already had every answer he needed, and that the man I thought I was marrying had turned my biggest secret into his quiet, devastating revenge. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The week before the wedding felt like a blur of white fabric, checklists, and congratulations. Everyone said I was glowing. Maybe I was. Or maybe it was guilt dressed up as excitement. Nathan and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. He was calm through everything, venue delays, my complaints, my stress about the flowers. He'd smile and say, "You've got this, Liora." He never snapped, never doubted, never made me feel small. And that was the problem. He made it too easy to lie. It started with a message from Owen, my ex from college. He'd seen one of my wedding posts and wrote, "So you finally settled down?" I could have ignored it. Should have. But instead, I wrote back something clever about how planning other people's weddings made me forget what romance looked like. He replied that I hadn't changed. I liked that, being seen as someone who hadn't become boring. Within a few hours, we were messaging like no time had passed. I told myself it was innocent, that I was just closing a chapter before starting a new one. Owen had always been reckless, but he made me laugh. He said he'd be in town for work that weekend and suggested we catch up for old time's sake. I told Nathan I had a client meeting for a destination wedding and that it might run late. He didn't question it. He never did. He kissed my forehead, told me not to overwork myself, and went back to checking our registry list. Meeting Owen felt like slipping into a dream I wasn't supposed to have anymore. We met at a quiet bar near the river. He looked older but still had that same grin, the kind that made you feel like a secret. He teased me about being a married woman-to-be, asked if I was nervous. I told him I was fine, that everything was perfect. But then I said something I shouldn't have, that sometimes perfection felt like suffocation. He laughed, told me I still had fire. I pretended to agree. We talked for hours, long after I said I should go. My phone buzzed once, Nathan texting, "Everything okay?" I said yes, just wrapping up. Owen ordered another drink. I stayed. When I finally got home past midnight, the apartment lights were low. Nathan was still awake, working on his laptop. He looked up and smiled. "You look tired," he said. I told him the client was demanding, that it went well in the end. He nodded and said, "I'm proud of you." I kissed him goodnight, trying not to let my hands shake. The next morning, I deleted all the messages. I told myself it was over, but Owen texted again 2 days later. Just a joke, harmless. Then another. I replied because it was easier than ignoring it. I even started saving his contact under a fake client name, Marina. Every time the phone lit up, I'd feel a rush of adrenaline followed by a wave of shame, but no one knew. That made it feel safe. At work, I told my assistant that Nathan was being moody and distant, that men always get cold feet before weddings. She laughed and said, "You're the calm one then." I nodded, pretending that was true. That night, Nathan cooked dinner, and I spent the whole meal talking about guest lists and table settings, keeping him busy so he wouldn't ask anything real. Later, when I went to plug in my phone, I saw the laptop on his desk open to a spreadsheet. It wasn't work. It was our shared account. He was reviewing transactions, highlighting something in red. I froze. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Just double-checking budgets," he said. I laughed too quickly, said I trusted him with all of that. When he went to bed, I peeked at the screen again. The red line was the hotel receipt from my client meeting. My heart dropped. I shut the laptop and told myself he hadn't noticed the date. He couldn't have. Still, I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything in my head, the messages, the drinks, the way his eyes lingered when I got home. By morning, Nathan was cheerful again, making coffee like nothing had happened. I told myself I was safe. I'd buried the evidence and the wedding was only days away. Nothing would come out. Nothing could. I had it all under control, or at least, I thought I did. The next few days were filled with fittings, rehearsals, and endless photos. Every time I looked at Nathan, I tried to see if he knew. He didn't act like it. He was polite, calm, even affectionate in that quiet way he had. But there was something different about his eyes, measured, like he was studying me. I told myself it was wedding stress. Everyone gets tense before the big day, right? At my final dress fitting, my sister Naomi came along. She kept teasing me about being nervous. I told her I wasn't nervous, just exhausted. She laughed and said, "You always have to look in control." I shrugged. She didn't know how true that was. Then she asked about Owen, too casually. "Didn't he used to live near the venue? Did you ever invite him?" My heart skipped. I asked why she'd bring that up. She said she'd seen him comment on one of my old posts. I told her it was nothing, that we hadn't talked in years. She looked at me for a long moment, then dropped it. That night, Nathan's family hosted a small dinner at his mother's house. Carol adored Nathan, but tolerated me at best. She always said I was too polished, like she meant fake. She smiled when I arrived, but her eyes flicked to Nathan, as if checking his mood. The conversation was light at first. Wedding plans, honeymoon, work updates. Nathan talked about how proud he was of how organized everything was. I smiled, pretending to relax. Then Tessa, my best friend and bridesmaid, decided to open her big mouth. She was half drunk and always thought teasing me was funny. She said, "Liora's still got men from college chasing her. That old boyfriend of hers messaged her recently, right?" Everyone laughed, except Nathan. He looked at me, not angry, just curious. I said Tessa was exaggerating, that it was just a friendly hello, but my chest burned. Carol smiled tightly and said, "Well, good thing she's marrying someone stable." The whole table laughed again, but the tone was off. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door, staring at my reflection. My hands were shaking. I told myself no one suspected anything, that they were just joking. But the longer I looked in the mirror, the less I believed it. When I came back, Nathan was clearing plates with his mother, calm as ever. I offered to help, but he said, "You relax. You've done enough planning." His tone was kind, but it didn't feel kind. It felt like a warning I couldn't quite read. The next morning, Naomi called. Her voice was sharp. She said, "I saw a message pop up on your phone last night from someone named Owen." My stomach dropped. I asked what she was doing looking at my phone. She said it was by accident, that she'd picked it up thinking it was hers. It said, "Last night was worth it," she told me. My throat went dry. I told her she must have misread it, that it was about a client event. She didn't believe me. Naomi came over that afternoon. She sat across from me in silence for a long time before saying, "You can't marry him if you're doing this." I laughed too loudly, told her she was being dramatic. "It's not like that," I said. "I just needed to know I wasn't making a mistake." She said quietly, "You already did." Then she left. I spent the rest of the day convincing myself she wouldn't tell anyone. Naomi was loyal. She'd protect me. But I couldn't shake the image of her face. Disgusted. Disappointed. That night, I deleted every trace of Owen from my phone, every message, every photo. Then I stared at the blank screen, feeling both lighter and emptier. Nathan came home late. He asked if I'd eaten. I said yes. He nodded, then kissed my forehead. "2 more days," he said softly. "Then it's just us." I smiled and said I couldn't wait, but when he turned away, I saw a flash of something in his eyes again. Not anger, not hurt, just certainty. I lay awake that night, replaying Naomi's words. "You can't marry him if you're doing this." Maybe she was right. But I couldn't stop now. The venue was booked, the guests were flying in, the photos already posted. I'd built a whole life around being the perfect bride. I couldn't let one mistake destroy it. So I promised myself I'd walk down that aisle like nothing happened. No guilt, no fear, just a perfect smile. And if Nathan knew anything, he'd have to keep it to himself, at least until after the wedding. The rehearsal day started bright and calm, the kind of morning that pretends everything is fine. I woke up before Nathan, studied his face on the pillow beside me, and tried to read it. He looked peaceful, but in that distant way again, like someone who'd already made a decision. I wanted to ask if we were okay, but I couldn't without revealing why I was afraid. So I kissed his shoulder and said, "Big day tomorrow." He smiled without opening his eyes and said, "Yeah, big day." At the rehearsal venue, everything was flawless. My team handled the decorations, the musicians played softly, and everyone kept saying how beautiful it all looked. I smiled through every compliment. Naomi arrived late, avoiding my gaze. When I asked if she was mad at me, she said she was just tired. Tessa, on the other hand, was loud and tipsy before noon, making jokes about how I'd better enjoy my last night of freedom. I laughed along, but I caught Nathan watching her, unreadable again. After the run-through, we all met at the hotel bar nearby. That's when things started to tilt. Tessa kept ordering drinks and talking too much. At one point, she leaned close to Naomi and whispered something that made my sister stiffen. I saw Naomi glance at me, then back at her phone. I told myself they were gossiping about bridesmaid dresses or makeup, but my stomach knew better. An hour later, I stepped outside to breathe and saw Naomi standing with Nathan near the parking lot. She was speaking quietly, her hands moving in sharp little gestures. When I walked up, they both stopped talking. Naomi said she was heading home early, hugged me without meeting my eyes, and left. Nathan just said, "Everything okay?" I forced a smile and said yes. He nodded and walked back inside. That short exchange felt heavier than any argument. Back in the bar, Tessa slurred something about college guys always coming back around. I snapped at her to stop. She laughed and said, "What? It's true. Owen told me that himself." My heart dropped. I said, "What are you talking about?" She shrugged, scrolling through her phone. "He messaged me after your engagement post. Said he'd seen you again. I thought it was a joke." I tried to play it off, saying she misunderstood, but she looked confused. "Wait, you mean you didn't?" I snatched the phone from her hand and saw the chat. Owen had bragged about meeting me, about one last night before she belongs to someone else. My skin went cold. I deleted the message before she could react and hissed that she should never repeat it. She stared at me, speechless. I told her she'd just misread it, that he was making things up for attention. She nodded slowly, but I could tell she didn't believe me. When I got back to our suite later, Nathan was already there, sitting at the desk. He asked if I had fun. I said yes, forcing a smile. He looked at me for a moment and then said, "You've been different lately." I laughed lightly and said it was just wedding nerves. He said, "I hope that's all it is." I barely slept that night. Every sound made me jump, the buzz of my phone, the creak of the floor. Around midnight, I went to the bathroom and found Nathan's phone on the counter, unlocked. A folder was open on the screen. Photos, screenshots, dates. My breath caught. One of the images was of me leaving the hotel bar with Owen days earlier. My reflection looked frozen in time, laughing, careless. I closed the phone quickly, terrified he'd wake up. When I crawled back into bed, I lay perfectly still, pretending to sleep. Nathan's breathing was steady beside me. I wondered how long he'd known, how much he'd seen, but he didn't move, didn't ask, didn't accuse. The silence felt worse than any shouting ever could. It was the sound of someone quietly building a case, one fact at a time. And lying there beside him, I realized maybe I wasn't the one in control anymore. The morning of the wedding was too perfect. Blue sky, soft air, everything glowing like a promise. Everyone kept saying how calm I looked. I was calm because I had no choice. Makeup artists fluttered around me, bridesmaids laughed, and cameras clicked like applause. I watched myself in the mirror, smiling, flawless, every detail planned. If I could just get through today, everything would fall back into place. That's what I kept telling myself. Nathan arrived late to the venue for final photos. He was wearing the suit I'd chosen, navy, crisp, understated, and he looked impossibly composed. He kissed my cheek like a polite stranger and asked if I was ready. I said I'd never been more ready. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. For a second, I thought about asking him if he still wanted this, but the photographer interrupted, telling us to pose. We stood side by side, smiling for the camera, both of us pretending we hadn't already broken. Naomi helped me with my veil. Her hands trembled a little. I asked if she was nervous for me. She said, "No, I'm nervous for him." I laughed it off, but she didn't laugh back. She whispered, "He knows, Liora." My chest went tight. I asked what she meant. She just shook her head and said, "You'll see." Before I could press her, my mother burst into the room fussing over flowers and lipstick, and Naomi slipped away. Minutes later, the coordinator announced it was time. The music started, the doors opened, and everyone turned toward me. I walked down the aisle to the man who was supposed to be my forever. Nathan looked steady, almost peaceful, his eyes locked on mine. For a moment, I let myself believe he'd forgiven me, that love had won, that everything was still possible. Then I noticed something odd. He wasn't holding the ring box. In his hands was a thin black folder. My heart gave a hard, fast jolt. I tried to keep smiling, each step heavier than the last. When I reached him, he leaned forward slightly and said quietly, "Before we start, I have something to say." The guests shifted, confused. The officiant looked at him, waiting. Nathan handed over the folder. His voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. "Before vows, there should be truth," he said. My pulse roared in my ears. The officiant hesitated, opened the folder, and froze. He glanced at me, then at Nathan. Nathan nodded. "Go ahead," he said. Inside were printed pages, emails, screenshots, photos, my name, my number, timestamps, hotel details, Owen's name, every lie neatly documented. The officiant looked lost. The guests whispered. My mother gasped. Nathan's tone didn't rise, didn't falter. "I thought I was marrying someone honest," he said, still looking only at me. "I was wrong." I shook my head, tried to speak, but no sound came out. The crowd rustled, a low tide of confusion and pity. Naomi had tears in her eyes. Tessa turned pale. My mother started saying something, excuses, explanations, but Nathan lifted a hand, silencing everyone. "There won't be a wedding today," he said. He turned, handed the officiant a second envelope, and added, "This is a legal notice. The contract's been voided." Then he looked back at me one last time. "You always said you wanted freedom, so here it is." He walked out, just like that. No shouting, no drama, just quiet finality. The guests didn't move at first. No one knew what to do. I stood frozen, veil trembling, throat dry. Naomi stepped forward to steady me, but I pulled away. I didn't want pity. I wanted to wake up. But this was real. The cameras had captured everything. My shocked face, the folder, the silence. The perfect wedding I'd built had turned into a public execution. Outside, through the open doors, I saw Nathan's car pulling away. For the first time, I understood what calm looked like when it belonged to someone who no longer cared. It was peace, and it terrified me. I don't remember walking out of the venue. 1 minute, I was standing under the arch of white roses. The next, I was outside, surrounded by whispers and cameras. My mother was shouting at the wedding coordinator to stop the guests from leaving, as if any of them wanted to stay. Naomi was on the phone, probably calling Nathan. I could barely breathe. The folder was still in my hands, its papers flapping in the breeze. Photos, messages, receipts, everything I thought I'd buried. I sat down on the stone steps and stared at the evidence. He hadn't missed a thing. There were screenshots of every text, including the ones I'd deleted, hotel bills, copies of my work calendar showing fake appointments, even a signed statement from a hotel clerk confirming I'd booked a room under a false client name. My name, printed beside words like deception and infidelity, made me want to throw up. My mother came running over. "We'll fix this," she said. "He's overreacting." Her voice was shaking but determined, the same tone she used when smoothing over family scandals. She grabbed my hands, saying, "You're emotional, he's emotional, it's just stress." I pulled away. "He's not emotional," I said. "He planned this." Inside the hall, guests were gathering their things in awkward silence. I heard fragments of pity disguised as gossip. Poor Nathan. I can't believe she did that. How humiliating. I wanted to scream that it wasn't that simple, that it wasn't all my fault. But I knew that anything I said would sound like a lie. By afternoon, Nathan had vanished. His phone went straight to voicemail. His mother, Carol, called mine and said Nathan was staying with her until things are settled. Settled. Like this was just another business transaction. My mother started drafting a statement for social media, insisting we could control the narrative. I told her to stop, that it would only make things worse. She said, "You always cared too much about what people think. Now's not the time to care." That night, I went home to our apartment. Half of it was empty. His clothes, his books, even his toothbrush, gone. On the kitchen counter sat a small envelope addressed to me. Inside was a note in his handwriting. "The lawyer will contact you tomorrow. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Nothing else." No anger, no insults, just that measured, polite distance. The lawyer called at noon the next day. His tone was calm, professional. He said Nathan had annulled the marriage contract preemptively. Apparently it hadn't been officially filed, so he'd voided it hours before the ceremony. "There are also financial matters," he said. "Mr. Corbin has requested to separate all shared assets immediately." I told him we didn't have shared assets yet. He said he's ensuring it stays that way. Later that day, I went to Carol's house to confront him. She opened the door but blocked the entry. "He doesn't want to see you," she said. I said I just wanted to talk. She sighed and stepped outside. "You don't get it, do you? He's done talking. He's already moved on to the next step." I asked what that meant. She handed me a folder, another one, thinner this time. "He's filed a defamation waiver," she said. "You're not allowed to publicly discuss him or the events leading to the cancellation. It's legal protection." I laughed in disbelief. "So he can humiliate me in front of everyone, but I can't even defend myself?" She looked at me evenly. "You had your turn, Liora." Back in my car, I opened the new folder. It was all there again. Proof, documentation, signatures. He'd even attached an email from his company's HR department verifying he'd taken unpaid leave to resolve personal matters, making him look responsible and composed. I wanted to tear it apart, but I couldn't. Everything about it was precise and airtight. That evening, Naomi showed up at my apartment. She looked exhausted. She said, "You should stay with Mom for a while." I asked if she'd talked to Nathan. She nodded. "He said he wishes you well." I laughed bitterly. "That's it? That's his big revenge?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and said, "His revenge is that he doesn't care anymore." We sat in silence. Finally, I asked, "Did you tell him?" She hesitated before nodding. "I had to. You were going to marry him, Liora. He deserved to know." I didn't respond. She stood to leave but paused in the doorway. "He didn't want to ruin your life," she said softly. "He just wanted the truth to be seen." The next morning, I got another email from Nathan's lawyer. Attached was a digital document confirming the annulment's completion, along with a financial statement showing he'd already moved his savings into a separate account. He'd even canceled the joint credit card we were supposed to activate after the honeymoon. I called the lawyer immediately, saying I hadn't agreed to any of this. He replied, "There's nothing for you to agree to, Ms. Dane. There was no legal marriage." I hung up and sat there staring at the walls. The apartment suddenly felt like someone else's space. Everything inside, our photos, our furniture, was proof of a life that never officially existed. Later that day, my mother arrived unannounced. She looked around, sighed, and said, "He's making a show of being noble. You could still spin this, you know." I told her no. There was nothing to spin. She shook her head, muttering that I'd let him win. But Nathan hadn't won by shouting or suing or turning people against me. He'd simply erased me. Quietly, legally, perfectly. I kept expecting him to break, to lash out, to act human. But his calmness was worse. It was as if I'd been removed from his story entirely. That night I opened my laptop and typed his name, just to see if anything new appeared. His social media had been wiped clean. No photos, no wedding posts, nothing. Even our engagement pictures were gone. It was like I'd been deleted, line by line, from the world we'd built. I thought revenge would look like anger. But his was colder than anger. It was paperwork, timing, silence. It was a man taking back his dignity while I watched mine dissolve. The first week after the wedding, that wasn't felt like floating through fog. Every morning, I woke up expecting a message from Nathan. Something. Anything. Even an insult would have been better than this silence. But there was nothing. Just the sound of my phone buzzing with pity texts from people I didn't want to hear from. I deleted most of them without opening. My mother insisted I move in with her. She said it would look better. I think she meant safer. Her house smelled the same as it did when I was a teenager. Lemons and furniture polish. But now it felt suffocating. Every conversation was about damage control. "We can still salvage your reputation," she said over breakfast. "People forget fast." I told her I didn't care about people. She raised an eyebrow. "You've always cared about people." She wasn't wrong. I used to love being admired, envied, talked about. Now, I just wanted everyone to stop looking at me. Naomi came by one afternoon, carrying a box of my things from the apartment. She placed it on the table and said, "He asked me to drop these off." Inside were my planner, a set of keys, and a framed photo of us from our first trip together. The frame was cracked. "He didn't throw anything away," she added quickly, as if that made it kinder. "He just left it all behind." I stared at the photo for a long time before setting it face down. My friends had stopped calling, even Tessa. At first I was angry. Then I realized they probably didn't know what to say. Everything I'd built my image around, perfection, control, beauty, was gone. No one wants to be near the woman who fell off her pedestal. One evening, Naomi tried to talk to me again. "You should apologize," she said. "Not for him, for yourself." I snapped back, asking what good that would do. "He doesn't even want to hear from me." She sighed. "Then write it, even if you don't send it." I told her I wasn't pathetic enough to write letters to a man who erased me. She looked at me like she pitied me and said, "Then maybe you haven't learned anything." After she left, I actually sat down to write. Not for him, just to make sense of it. But every sentence turned into an excuse. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared of being boring. I thought love needed risk." The words sounded hollow, even to me. I deleted the whole thing. A few days later, Nathan's lawyer emailed again. Final paperwork. It included a statement confirming the annulment had been processed and all records sealed. Attached was a scanned letter in Nathan's handwriting. Just one line. "Please direct all future communication through legal channels. I wish you peace." I read that sentence over and over. Peace. Like it was something he could give me just by saying it. I tried calling his number again. Blocked. His work email? Bounced. Even his social media? Gone. He'd closed every door, erased every trace. For someone who once let me into every part of his life, his absence felt surgical. I'd thought he would grieve, rage, something. But he hadn't left room for emotion, only precision. My mother still wanted to fix things. She told neighbors the wedding was postponed, not canceled. She asked if I could post something online, maybe a focus on self-growth quote. I refused. "I'm not pretending everything's fine," I said. She rolled her eyes. You've built your whole life pretending, Liora. Why stop now? I didn't answer. At night, I kept seeing the moment at the altar, the folder in his hand, the quiet way he looked at me as if I were already a memory. I used to think love ended in screaming, in tears, in begging, but ours ended in silence. A silence so final it hurt to breathe in it. A week later, I met with a potential client, an older couple who didn't recognize my name. I went through the motions, pitching color palettes and floral arrangements, pretending I was still a professional woman and not the woman from the wedding scandal. Halfway through the meeting, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the local news site. The headline read, "Financial Analyst Cancels Wedding, Cites Irreconcilable Truths." I clicked it. Nathan had given a single statement through his lawyer. No names, no accusations, just that phrase. I stared at the words until my eyes blurred. Irreconcilable truths. That was his final word for us. Not lies. Truths. And I knew what he meant. The truth that he was steady and I was reckless. The truth that he'd loved me completely, and I'd mistaken that love for weakness. When I got home that night, my mother was asleep on the couch. I went into my old room and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed again, an email from a venue asking to confirm cancellation details. Nathan had already done it. Every vendor, every contract, closed cleanly with his signature. I opened the closet where my wedding dress hung in its bag. I unzipped it and ran my fingers over the fabric, still perfectly white, untouched, like a ghost of what was supposed to be. I thought about throwing it away, but I couldn't. It was the last proof that for a moment someone had believed I was worth forever. Later, I sat on the floor with the cracked photo frame Naomi had brought. I looked at our faces, his easy smile, my tilted head, my hand resting on his chest. I'd once believed that look in his eyes meant unconditional love. Now I saw it for what it was, trust, and I'd destroyed it. Outside, the night was quiet. I imagined Nathan somewhere else, calm, asleep, maybe already starting over. The thought burned, not because he'd moved on, but because he'd done it so cleanly. I used to think revenge meant getting even, but Nathan never tried to hurt me. He just left me to face what I'd become. He didn't need to destroy me. He let me destroy myself. And maybe that was always the kindest and cruelest thing he could have done. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.